Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ryan Bijan, host of COWTOWN Movie Classics. And tonight we are ringing in the new year with one of the quintessential film noirs, and certainly one of the most fascinating films, fascinating melodramas about Hollywood and the filmmaking process certainly ever made. And tonight's guest is a very special one. He is a prolific writer, biographer, film historian. He is the author of the book Marilyn Monroe, The Private Life of a Public Icon, and Elizabeth and Monty. Please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Charles Casillo. How are you doing tonight, Charles?
I'm doing well. It's very good to be here.
So, tonight's film, of course, from 1950, it's Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. What are your earliest memories of this film? What was your kind of first exposure to this great movie?
Well, when I was a kid, we had like five channels, and on the late night show, they'd show these old movies. So I was maybe like 10 or 11 when I first saw Sunset Boulevard at midnight or so, because I
Mhm.
was, even at that age, I was hooked on the old movies. And my first experience with it was, for a kid that age, it was so creepy and fascinating. And you don't really pick up on all the reasons why until you're much older.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I did, just as a sensitive person, I picked up on, the comedy and the tragedy and the longing for youth, and all those things came through. And as I got older and saw it many, many more times, it sharpened for me the themes of the film.
Now, that's kind of interesting because the film, it is sort of even though it's a work of fiction, it is a true Hollywood story of this legendary actress of the silver screen of the silent era, her coming to terms with sort of obsolescence and trying to reinvigorate her career at a later point in her life. As someone who's made a career out of writing biographies of a lot of these legendary figures like Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, how do these themes and ideas resonate with you?
Well, one of the things is the emphasis on youth in Hollywood. I lived in Hollywood, and I'm from New York City, and I've lived in Hollywood, and I think it's a little easier now on getting older, maybe because people look better and are more vital than they were. But there was, especially in the golden age of Hollywood, and especially for women, as they got older, they were thought of as lesser a star, lesser a beauty, lesser a person.
Mhm.
And I think that Sunset Boulevard embodies that because, looking at it now, I mean, I'm older than Norma Desmond was. I mean, she always seemed so old to me. She always seemed like such an old lady. She was only 50. I mean,
Right.
that's really young, but they portrayed her as being such a relic, and it's sad, but it's one of the things that I've noticed from living in Hollywood, writing about Hollywood, is that emphasis is on youth and beauty, and also the wanting for it again, the longing for youth to bring it back. Sometimes by falling in love with someone who's younger, sometimes by getting plastic surgery. I mean, in the movie, she doesn't have plastic surgery, but she goes through that really rigorous beauty regime to get her youth back.
Oh, yes, certainly. And it's funny you mentioned that. Like when you watch the movie, they make a big deal. It's just like, well, Norma, you're 50 years old. There's no way. And it's just like you said, 50 is not that old. But I
Yeah,
remember when I saw it for the first time, William Holden, even like by today's standards, he looks like a middle-aged man
yeah.
by today's standards, in which he was what, in his 30s, like late
I think
30s.
he was like 32 only. Like he wasn't even in his late 30s.
Geez, that makes me feel. I mean, obviously he's a very good-looking, very attractive man, but just people age differently, especially in 1950.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because he wasn't the first choice for the role. I mean, when we see these classic films, it's hard to believe that, anyone else was once considered for those roles. But that role was actually planned for Montgomery Clift.
Wow.
And he backed out at like pretty much the last minute because he himself was having an affair, a strange kind of relationship with an older woman, and he thought the movie too much mirrored his real life, and that it would bring some bad publicity if that was all dug up. He was having an affair with a torch singer named Libby Holman, who was quite a bit older than him. So it was like a mirror image of the movie, and he decided not to do it. But it's again, and also Gloria Swanson wasn't the first choice for the role. I mean, it seems kind of weird that Billy Wilder was considering Mae West for it because Mae West never considered herself an older woman, and she never, I think it was in her contract that she never played anyone who was older than 28. Even though she never made a movie before she was 39, but
Yeah.
So it kind of wouldn't have worked because she didn't have that kind of like tragic, she's great with a one-liner, but I don't think she would have brought the kind of tragedy that Gloria Swanson did to it. A
Oh,
real
absolutely.
sensitivity.
You know, it's bad because I'm a huge Mae West fan. I think she's genuinely funny. I love those pre-code comedies, right?
Yes.
So it's like I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. I think she probably had the chops to pull it off, but it certainly would have been against type, what you would have
And she
expected.
wouldn't have done it because she didn't see herself as ever as an older woman. If you see Sextet, she's like in her 80s and she was playing a leading lady.
Yeah,
I don't think it would have had the darkness to it. It would have been much more of a comedy than it is with
yeah,
her. But I do remember reading, I think it was in Gloria Swanson's autobiography, where she said that when William Holden came on board, they didn't look like there was too much of an age difference, and they were
right.
trying to make her look older. And she said, rather than try to make me look older, why don't you try to make him look younger?
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, it's funny you bring that up because I was looking into Gloria Swanson's career. Of course, she really was an icon of the silent cinema. She really did work with Cecil B. DeMille in these epic films dating back to the 1910s, right? I mean, she really was a pioneering actress.
Yeah.
And by the time she made Sunset Boulevard, it had been almost a decade since she had been in a film in any type of capacity. So, was there any hesitation for her to take on a role like this? Maybe fear of typecasting, or do you feel like at that point it's like, yeah, well, I've been out of the business so long, there's nothing left to lose.
I think it was more of that. I think that a role like that, Norma Desmond, to come around in that day for a woman of that age, an actress, was, like a godsend, a windfall. I mean, it's such a great role. It's one of the great roles of
Hmm.
that era. Another interesting point. I mean, that year, All About Eve and Born Yesterday and Sunset Boulevard all came with
Right.
three magnificent, really the best of all of their careers performances. I think Betty Davis's best performance is in All About Eve, and poor Judy Holliday didn't have a chance to really, didn't live long enough to really explore her potential. And Gloria Swanson, that's like one of her few, really talkies that are serious, a serious
Yeah.
talk. And it's just magnificent performances all around. So I wouldn't have wanted to be on the Academy Award voting system in that day because wow, I don't know who I would have picked.
I mean, that's definitely a tough one. Now, I've told my audience we've shown film noir, we showed a lot of great crime films from this era, and I always want to point out that the term film noir, of course, it's almost arbitrary because it's a term that sort of came about after the fact. Sunset Boulevard, what is it? Would you classify it? Is it a melodrama? Is it a thriller? A horror film? If you had to
Yes.
pigeonhole it, what would, yeah,
All of those things. It has, it does have the classic film noir with the voiceover and, it opens with a murder. So I don't think I'm
yeah,
giving anything away. It's dark, so it does have that. But yet, I mean, it's a black comedy, which a lot of film noirs aren't. They don't have that level of, dark comedy in it. So it's really hard to pigeonhole with that. It's really a thing of within itself. Um, but yeah, no, film noir, I think, it certainly fits in the category.
hmm, absolutely. So, for anyone in the audience who hasn't seen Sunset Boulevard before, and maybe this is their first time seeing it, in a community setting, what do they have to look forward to?
Well, one of the great female performances of that era for sure. And Billy Wilder at his best. I mean, it's just such a great script. It has witty dialogue. It has funny situations. It has tragic situations. It has just the right balance of sex and humor and tragedy and comedy. It's really a masterpiece. So if you're seeing it for the first time, what a treat.
Oh yeah,
But every time I see it, it's one of the movies. Every time I see it, I find something new in it.
oh yeah, absolutely. Charles, thank you so much. If you're in the audience, please stick around after the film so you can hear the rest of our conversation. Without further ado, director Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. To me, that movie never gets old.
No, no. Like I said, every time you see it, you could find something new in it, something new to admire about it.
How did this come about in the first place?
Billy Wilder, I think that from working in Hollywood, he did have an idea of it. I think that the themes, Hollywood in its day was like a dream factory, and a lot of the behind the scenes really didn't reach the public. I mean, they had full PR people to keep the behind the scenes dirt, so to speak, out of it. And I think working in it, when your a mind is keen and sharp as Billy Wilder, you kind of long to like expose some of that in a creative way. So I think that being part of the Hollywood scene definitely probably played into why he wanted to tell a story like this, which is, all of that stuff goes on, older, younger, longing for comeback, double crosses, all the things that, cheating, all the things that are part of that movie, the ambition of a writer, the ambition of an actor, it's all in there. So yeah, it was probably like a treasure chest for him of themes and ideas that he could bring to the screen.
Well, he certainly succeeded. What was the public I mean, now of course we revere it as one of the great classic movies. It's up there with Citizen Kane, Vertigo, Casablanca. But what was the reception like at the time in 1950?
Oh, it was a hit. Yeah, it was definitely a hit, and it brought a new interest in Gloria Swanson's career, and it furthered William Holden and cemented, Billy Wilder as being, one of the most sought after directors of his day. It was a hit, as was All About Eve, as was, Born Yesterday. Those three films with powerhouse performances by women. But I do think that Sunset Boulevard really was probably the most influential of them, because the whole thing of it being narrated by a dead man is so unusual. Even for today, it would be unusual. It was such a startling thing, I think, for audiences. And there was a different opening was filmed for that movie, which they thought was just too weird for the day. But the corpse of William Holden's character actually goes into the morgue, and he has a conversation with the other dead bodies there about how they died, and that was how Sunset Boulevard was, the original opening was to be.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah.
That's something. Well, it's funny you bring that, and I feel like an idiot now. I've seen it so many times since. I remember the first time I saw it, when we see that initial shot of William Holden in the swimming pool, I couldn't quite recognize his face. It just seemed distorted to me. So I did not necessarily make the connection that it was his character, because it's like obviously it can't be him because he's narrating it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it was when I found out at the end, I was like, okay, he's the one who got shot and killed, and he died from it. I thought, oh, okay, well, so it was still a surprise even to me.
Yeah, no, it is a surprise. I mean, to have a story narrated by the murder victim is, it's kind of genius. I think it's kind of genius.
Mhm.
He's telling the story, and and the character. I mean, it brings a lot of sympathy for him, because from the very beginning what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
He could seem a little bit conniving and mercenary when you're watching it. If you didn't know that he was going to actually wind up dead, she deteriorates into madness, and partially Hollywood that does it to her, because there was no role for a woman in that era. There was no place for a woman of her age in the movie industry in that era.
With the exaggerated makeup, the lighting, she does come off as a very kind of witchy presence. But it's funny, if you go on YouTube, you can watch interviews with Gloria Swanson, like on the Dick Cavett show in the 70s and 80s.
Oh
And
yeah,
she seems so youthful and energetic, even
yes,
the voice. She's so completely different from Norma Desmond.
definitely. You ever see the one when she's on with Janis Joplin and like she's totally holding her
Yeah,
own?
I have seen that, yeah. And it's so crazy because this is like 23, 25 years after Sunset Boulevard, and she seems more youthful in real life than she does in
Yeah,
the film.
that's a testament to her acting, that she put that that really gloomy kind of deranged spin on it, on the character.
And do you think that's something that, do you think that association, that typecasting, even though it did technically revitalize her career, was there sort of an embarrassment? Did she have to make it known, like, okay, look, I'm Gloria Swanson, Norma Desmond's a fictional character. There's some overlap, but I am not this person.
I would think that she had that. The films that she made after that were not successful.
Hmm.
And then, of course, Carol Burnett in the 1970s did a magnificent spoof of that character, just for comedy without the shadings to it. And
Yeah.
so, I think that she'd probably rather be associated with that role than not be remembered at all. And I don't know how remembered she would be outside of real hardcore movie aficionados to with her silent work.
Mhm.
Silent work, it just, even like people like Clara Bow, who's such a magnificent silent film star. She's not as known as she should be because she has so few talkies. Um,
Yeah.
so that Gloria Swanson got that chance to reintroduce herself to audiences and to film historians for all time is, it was worth whatever negative connotations came with it.
Well, that's good. I mean, I do like that trend of plucking these actors, these older iconic figures from another era and giving them a shot. Like I think of one of the films we watched in December, we did The Night of the Hunter. And of course that has Lillian Gish in that
Yes.
amazing supporting role, and she's definitely a
Yeah.
standout in that. Um, but speaking of the silent era, it's a lot of fun watching this movie because you do have those cameos. You do have Cecil B. DeMille playing himself,
Yes.
Eric von Stroheim playing a fictionalized version of himself as the butler. And one of my favorite cameos is we have H.B. Warner, who is Jesus and the King of Kings. He gets a shout out in the film too. So
And even Gloria Swanson has a little cameo because they show her film, her
yeah,
silent film that they're watching together. That was a film that Gloria Swanson actually never completed because she was making it when it was that transition period between silence and talkies. So that film that's shown in the movies, with the candles and they're watching it, and she gets
yeah,
up and she's, yeah, I'll be there again. Yeah, that was Gloria, the real Gloria Swanson, making her cameo in the movie.
yeah. All right. Well, do you have any closing thoughts on the film? Is there anything on your most recent rewatch that maybe stuck out that you hadn't noticed before?
Um, no, just why I feel that it's so important for channels like Turner Classic Movies to keep these movies in front of people in a way that they don't have to go seeking them out. There's such a there's such a glorious way of storytelling, and of seeing history and learning about the artists of other generations. I mean, it's everything's so quick today. So, the stars come and go so quickly, and the personalities come and go so quickly. Everything's so quickly edited. To go back and take a breath and look at the way that things were done in the old days and the older days, and appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, no, definitely. Well, Charles, let me ask you. So, like again, as I mentioned, you're a very prolific author. You've done some wonderful work. Is there anything you're working on now? Like, what else can we look forward to?
Well, I have a few ideas with my agent right now, and we're just trying to work out which one it will be. It's getting tougher because the audience for this kind of stuff, as I say, the audience for Golden Age of Hollywood is shrinking.
Hmm.
So it's not just like doing a biography on Gloria Swanson. Say you've got to have some kind of a hook in there with it, because people will just Google Gloria Swanson and find out. So you've got to find out things that have never been told before, and you've got to approach it from a way that hasn't been approached before. So to be a writer about that era, which I love, it's also it's adding a new level of creativity if you want to keep it alive, because the audience is not as much there as it used to be.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, and I do feel like even hosting this series, I love these classic films. I know you love these classic films, and that's my goal with it. I want to make them accessible to people in the community. I want them to be able to see them with an audience the way they were meant to be seen, because they certainly have an impact. And I've shown some of the more mainstream classics. I've shown some really deep cut stuff, and it always makes me feel good when people enjoy the recommendations, and because of that, they seek out other films of the genre of that era of these actors.
It's great to do that because, like I said, when I was growing up, these were just on television, and you didn't have that much of a choice. So these movies were on. So that's how I was introducing them. Now it's people like you that are putting them in front of people so that they could know that there is a whole wealth of stuff out there. Before 1990, there's a
Mhm.
whole library of really terrific, wonderful stuff that doesn't. I mean, we can go on and on about the stuff that just never ages, that you could just watch. It's as contemporary as it was when it first came out, which is Sunset Boulevard is one of them.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, just because we're talking here, I'm fascinated. There's so many actors from like Hollywood's golden age that I revere. Some of my favorite actors of all time, like Lon Chaney Sr., James Cagney, Edward G. Robinson. I mean, there's so many wonderful Barbara Stanwyck, you name it, right? But there
Yeah.
are certain icons, especially the ones that you've written about, that why is it there's a lot of actors that have sort of fallen into the public, maybe obscurity in the public, but there are certain icons. Of course, Marilyn Monroe is one of them. You have
Yeah.
John Wayne. I'm just trying to think. Elvis Presley. There are certain stars. why are they still household names where even if you've never even seen their film, you've never seen Some Like It Hot, you've never watched Viva Las Vegas, but you know the names, you know the silhouette. How are those icons able to survive? Even like Elizabeth Taylor, right? People still know the name Elizabeth Taylor. Why is
Yes.
that?
Well, I think that some of the stars in the old days, which I really don't see that much in the stars of today, were
Yeah.
touched by magic. They had a little extra something that
Mhm.
we regular people don't have. The camera picked it up. Sometimes they didn't even have it in person. It was the camera picked it up. I mean, you're right. I mean, Marilyn Monroe trends more than any A-list celebrity today. I mean, she's always trending. Something Kardashians make her trend, or somebody makes her trend. Her dress, or somebody's wearing her dress, or someone did a photo shoot in her persona. I mean, so the fascination with her never goes. Of course, partially also when someone dies young,
Mhm.
like Elvis and Marilyn did, the unfulfilled promise of what they would have been. And there's something poetic about a woman who dies at the height of her beauty, and something Edgar Allan Poe about it. So
Right.
that plays into it too. But I do think, in the broader sense, the stars of that era had a little bit of the X factor in them that we don't even look for anymore. It's like, look at Rita Hayworth or Cary Grant, or when you get people to play them in modern day movies. I mean, it's like you could see how different it really is. I mean, how much more that the actual ones really did have.
Mhm. And what have you thought lately about some of these biopics that are coming out? Like Baz Luhrmann just did Elvis to great success, and then there's the film with Blonde with Ana de Armas. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I mean, do you have an opinion of these biopics trying to keep these images alive?
I didn't see the Elvis one. I did write quite a bit about Blonde. I always hated Blonde. I hate the book, and I hate that there was been more than one movie. I particularly hate the latest one.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do. Well, it doesn't even claim to be a biography. It's not a biography. It's
Right.
fiction.
Mhm.
But to fictionalize a person who actually was talented and smart as a very stupid person. I mean, it's more based on Marilyn's screen characters than it is on who she was in real life. I mean, I
Mhm.
always say it's kind of like Lorelei Lee stuck in the Valley of the Dolls. I mean, it has nothing to do with the real Marilyn Monroe. It's such an ugly portrayal.
Yeah.
I think people should be furious, especially in this day and age when women are finally being recognized for their achievement and not being pushed aside. To push her aside and make her come across as someone stupid and victimized all the time by men, and not being able to make her own decisions, or it's just a very, very ugly thing. And it hurt me because Marilyn is important to me. I know that sounds crazy. She died before I was born,
Yeah.
but I feel about her the way that some people would feel about almost like a relative, because
Mhm.
she's brought me so much. So yeah, Blonde really upset me. I feel that people like Elvis and Marilyn, their lives were fascinating enough. You don't have to you don't have to make a movie that's fictional. And if you do, at least try to be true to who they were. I
Yeah.
don't know if Elvis did that. I didn't see the Elvis one, but I know that the Marilyn one wasn't true to who she was at all.
I thought that the Elvis one was definitely more balanced. To me, Blonde, it was all of the tragedies, none of the triumphs. It was just they relegate her. She's just a sad, depressed woman. Like that's all there is to her. There's no victory. There's no talent. There's no passion.
No,
Uh,
there isn't. And all the
yeah.
wit that she had and the ambition. I mean, Marilyn was, really one of the first people, men and women, to break out of the studio system, start her own company so she could make her own films and make her own decisions. Where was that? Where was that? Where was that person who was Marilyn? It was completely, and Marilyn didn't walk around talking in a baby doll voice like Lorelei Lee did, or Sugar Kane.
Mhm.
She was an adult. She was an artist. She created, the persona of Marilyn Monroe on the screen the way Charlie Chaplin invented the Little Tramp. I mean, they
Mhm.
had these characters. So John Wayne, his Western characterizations. Doesn't mean they were like that in real life. I don't think that Charlie Chaplin walked around twirling a stick with a little mustache over here. I mean, so to portray Marilyn that way was just an insult to her and to her fans or anyone who knows anything about her.
No, I agree
It was
absolutely.
made by people who hate her. It was
Yeah.
obviously made by people who hate her, whether they admit it or not. They wanted to degrade. Marilyn Monroe was so degraded in her lifetime by not being taken serious. It seems a shame that here, all these years later, after she's dead, that people who dislike her so much are degrading her again.
Hmm. Yeah, which is certainly a shame, but that's why we need to check out your book so they can get the real story.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate
No,
that.
you did a wonderful job. Honestly, I highly recommend it. Now, as we close this out, the Sunset Boulevard, as you said, it's important to keep these classics alive, to keep them in the public consciousness. Where would you stand if there was a remake or reimagining as a film? First off, do you think there's an audience for it, or do you think the story could still? I mean, obviously the story stands the test of time, but do you think it could be modernized for a contemporary audience?
Well, I mean, look, the Broadway play, the musical version did phenomenally well.
Hmm.
So I don't see why it couldn't be. I mean, like Netflix or HBO making it into a limited series, but that's one view. But my view is when a movie's been done perfectly,
Yeah.
like Sunset Boulevard is, why tamper with that? Yeah, I mean, I don't think
Right.
anything new could be brought to it. So, other than seeing, new talent portraying those characters, which could be interesting, but usually they don't do it well as the first time when they do a classic.
Hmm.
They're classics for a reason. They were done perfectly the first time.
I think you're right. They're done well the first time. Just bring them back, put them back in theaters, and I think people will find them. They will discover them and
Oh
get to enjoy
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah. That's the way to go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. And for you in the audience, I hope you enjoyed the film. Once again, I'm Ryan Bijan. We'll see you next time.